Very excited today to co-host today's Mountain Talk with graduate of 1988, Michael Patrick O'Neill. Michael was born and raised in São Paulo, Brazil. He's an award-winning photographer, author, and FAA-certified drone pilot specializing in marine wildlife and environmental issues. He's written and photographed 9 nonfiction marine life books, crafted to inspire school children to read, write, and explore science and embrace conservation. When he's not behind the camera or writing, he's on the lecture circuit. Michael and I were just talking before this that he's going to Ohio shortly, and he's been on the road since November for the last several months, going around and doing the work that he's doing. Sharing his passion for the natural world and particularly for oceans and its inhabitants. He's presented to over 500,000 students in more than 500 schools across the United States over the last 20 years. So as we kind of go through, and before I pass things over to Michael, just a quick note on the presentation. We will be recorded for today, so if you're unable to stay for the entirety of the session, we will be able to send you the recording after the fact. As well for the kind of remainder of the presentation after Michael finishes up, so roughly 20 minutes or so, we'll do open dialogue and question and answer with Michael. So feel free to use the chat at the bottom of the screen to submit any questions that you have on the presentation today. So Michael, really excited about this. We were just talking a little bit about my interest in the ocean growing up and the impact of my grandmother, but really interested to hear about the work that you've done and the amazing photography that you've done over the last 30 years or so. So why don't you take us away and let's go diving.
All right, wonderful. Bryce, thank you so much for this very special opportunity to share my passion, my work with the Lehigh family. Guys, thank you so much for watching. I'm a graduate from 1988, as Bryce mentioned, and I was able to turn my hobby into my business. I'm a full-time photographer and author of 9 books. And while not diving, I'm out on the road making presentations, and it's been a wonderful year. And what I wanted to do this afternoon is just share with you 3 brief photo stories highlighting different aspects of the natural world. I think you're going to enjoy them. They're quite different. The first one that we're going to jump in is called Blackwater diving. To describe what blackwater diving is all about, every night, one of the largest migrations in the animal kingdom is underway. Tiny little planktonic creatures rise up from abyssal depths to feed near the surface of the ocean. So what do? Weather permitting, work schedules permitting, we hop on boats and we go 7 miles offshore where the water is about 700 to 800 feet deep, and we deploy powerful lights, the mandatory dive flag, and we wait for complete darkness to jump into the water. What we're waiting for is for these tiny creatures to come up to the surface under the cover of darkness, which is safer for them to feed. And at daybreak, every single day when you're brushing your teeth and getting ready to work, the reverse is happening. So there's this up and down movement every single day. And blackwater diving started in Hawaii, and now Florida, the Philippines, and a few other countries are some of the best spots. What's it like to be in the ocean at night, 7 miles offshore? It's eerie. It's surreal. The best way I can describe it is being an astronaut on a spacewalk, except I have my underwater camera in my hands and a scuba tank on my back, and we're out there looking for tiny little aliens. So these are some of my favorites. This is the hardest type of photography I've ever done. These animals are small, most of them smaller than a quarter. They're translucent. In this image, you can see this little batfish. It almost looks like a little spaceman encased in his little spacesuit. If you're lucky, you can find a larval stage moray eel, no more than 3 or 4 inches long. At this phase, it's still transparent. It has no pigmentation. Crazy punk rock type flounders are swimming around in the lights, feeding on tiny invertebrates. What makes this kind of diving so exciting is that up until recently, scientists would deploy nets and then return those nets to the back of the ship. And these animals are so delicate that by the time they made it, they had turned into mashed potatoes. And this generation of blackwater divers, which I'm proud to be part of, we're seeing these animals alive for the very first time. And there's some of my friends even dive with little Ziploc bags and collect them and ship them to the Smithsonian Museum, which is really cool. It's so dangerous there for these little animals that they'll spend the night inside jellyfish like this one. This is a little driftfish enclosed in his security blanket, his pink moon jelly. And they do this because there's no shortage of predators. There's lots of little crabs feeding on the little fish. And in turn, sharks like silky sharks will come and feed on the crabs. It's a dog eat dog world. Every time I get back on the boat, I kind of jokingly bless myself because the risk of getting lost at sea is significant. Just to give you an idea, little animals, little hitchhikers like this little seahorse, they'll hold on to little bits of seaweed and just go with the current. During a 2-hour dive, it's not unusual for the current to carry you. I hope everybody's sitting down. 14 miles. Think about this. This is a river of warm water in the ocean called the Gulf Stream, and it's just incredibly powerful. And you're in it when you're doing these dives, and you have to keep the lights that you saw in the beginning of the presentation within sight so you don't get lost at sea. Some of my favorite creatures to photograph include flying fish, and probably my all-time favorite, the blanket octopus. This is a male blanket octopus. I want you guys to think about this. A full-grown male blanket octopus is 2 inches long. His girlfriend is 6 feet long. Why such a discrepancy in size? Nobody really knows. And I hope there's a new generation of scientists that explore the ocean and continue unraveling the secrets that so many of us are dying to know. One more beautiful squid. The cephalopods, these animals, part of the octopus and squid family, are attracted by the lights, and the colors that they display is surreal, almost like science fiction. All right, my next photo story, just the highlights. Blacktip shark versus great hammerhead. Say hello to the blacktip shark, very common animal along the East Coast United States, 4 to 6 feet long, identified by that pointy nose and black markings along the fin tips. During the wintertime, they form enormous schools along the beach of Palm Beach County. Scientists estimate that roughly 12,000 blacktip sharks come from as far away as New York and New Jersey to spend the winter here. They come really close to the beach. Under these conditions, we have nothing to worry about. The water's crystal clear. These sharks don't eat people. They're just there for the bait fish. On other occasions, it's not a good idea to get in the water. On this day, these sharks were feeding on glass minnows, which were about the size of your finger. They were so close to the beach, they were almost landing on the sand. They are incredibly fast and acrobatic. I've nicknamed them the Ferraris of the ocean because they're so agile. And they have to be because they're dealing with bigger, badder predators. And my favorite is this guy here, the great hammerhead. I guess about a third of the diet of the great hammerhead consists of smaller sharks. And you may wonder, wow, one shark eats another one all day long. They're common in Florida. They're now protected, and they're especially abundant this time of the year where they're hunting the blacktip sharks. How do you take a photo like this? First of all, one thing that you need to know is that the blacktip shark is very shy. It doesn't like to come around people, so we have to chum them. We have to go down to the seabed with a milk crate full of old smelly fish and fish leftovers, and hopefully, if it's our lucky day, we're going to get a hammerhead in. And I hear that they've been getting quite a few this spring. Another common predator of the blacktips is the tiger shark. I call this photo the moment of truth. You can see this large shark approaching a friend of mine, Walt. And the last thing that Walt or any diver wants to do is turn around and swim away because they're obviously much faster than you. and they love to play chase. So the best thing to do with a big tiger like this is kind of just push it off with your camera or with your hand. And you have to be firm because they're very persistent and very, very sneaky. They like to sneak up behind you when you're not paying attention. Guys, look at those teeth. This is a local tiger shark called Jenny. How do we know it's Jenny and not another tiger shark? Because just like people, they have scars and beauty marks that help you identify one animal from the other. And so when you're diving with these sharks, you really have to keep all body parts away from the shark. We wear gloves, hoods, anything that makes you look like a rock or completely different from a piece of fish that this shark is eating. Now, I was very lucky a few years ago. I was working on a fishing charter as a cameraman, and there were hundreds of blacktip sharks near the beach in Juno Beach, not far from where I live. And I had my drone up, and I thought, wow, this is pretty cool. Why are there so many blacktip sharks there? And then I realized that they were getting hunted by a hammerhead. And you can see the hammerhead on the top center of the screen chasing down the blacktips. Notice how close the hammerhead gets. Also, pay attention how shallow the water is. The little black tips are very, very bright, and they know that a 600-pound hammerhead shark is unable to go where the water is knee deep. And this was one of the first times this behavior was filmed, and I was so nervous, I have to confess, I almost landed the drone on the back of the hammerhead shark. And the little black tips are fast, they're smart, but inevitably one is going to sooner or later get caught. And that's just how nature works. All right, to wrap up, completely different story. I'm known as an underwater photographer, but over the last years, I've expanded my horizons. And what may turn into a new book called The Jungle Jaguar Adventure for Kids is some of the material that I'm sharing with you here. And on 3 different occasions, I went to my home country of Brazil, to the Pantanal, which is the world's largest swamp. This is the largest wetland in the planet, 10 times bigger than the Florida Everglades. I've done a lot of traveling to remote places, and it's becoming harder and harder to find natural landscapes where you can see us forever without human development or clear cutting or construction. These jungles are teeming with life. You have beautiful macaws, toucanets, the kids' favorite, the capivara. This is the world's largest rodent. It can weigh 130 pounds. Think of it as a beaver without a tail. As an underwater guy, I'm always taking my camera. You can see a caiman here. Kids ask me all the time, and you may wonder, how do I take these photos without getting hurt? And by the way, I've never been hurt by an animal. Anybody game to get in the water with a 16-foot green anaconda? Guys, I was so nervous, I could not stop shaking. The snake is trying to smell me underwater. Next time you see a school bus around town, think about this. If a 16-foot green anaconda managed to wrap itself around you, it would feel like that school bus was sitting on your chest. But under no moment was the snake aggressive towards me. She's just trying to figure out what I'm doing. A little behind the scenes, my guide filmed this. You can see me in the water. I'm very quiet. I'm not moving. There's 3 caiman there. We're speaking in Portuguese back and forth. And there's one caiman. He's going to move the camera. You're going to see the second caiman there. And there's a third one around my legs, and I don't want to step on it. And I have to be very careful. And to bring out the most important point, I've always been very safe, very respectful of these animals, and I never go and do something without a guide. These guides are real experts. They live with these animals 24/7. They know the jungle, they know the sharks much better than I do. I am just a photographer, and I listen carefully and I follow instructions because I don't want to get hurt. After a lot of looking, we finally found the jaguars. Remember, it took 3 trips And the one that we got him was incredible. We had jaguars every day except our travel day. On the right side is the male. He's about 300 pounds. They're very big, powerful cats. His girl on the left is about 200 pounds. I have swam with great white sharks, been in the water with alligators, caiman, and whatnot, and I have yet to be more intimidated than when I was in front of these jaguars. It's hard to describe, but I felt like a caveman 50,000 years ago that I was getting sized up as a potential prey. They hunt in the water, they hunt out of the water. A place that we visited almost 3 years ago, the housekeeper got eaten by one of these jaguars. Another place where we went before we got there, a jaguar went into the kitchen and ate the owner's dog. This jungle is the real thing. It's not the place where you decide after a big meal that you're going to go for a walk because you are not the big kid on the block. They lead solitary lives. They only come together during their little honeymoon. They're supposed to be cuddling and snuggling, yet they're fighting like cats and dogs. And on this day, the situation was particularly tense because there was a second male in the neighborhood, and you could hear the two males vocalizing. And it was absolutely terrifying, the sound. I can't think of a worse place to go camping. Now, if I just showed you the pretty pictures, I don't think I would be doing a good job. The land of the jaguar is under assault. Their native rainforest is quickly turning into agricultural land. Okay, you can see these drone shots that I took. The land is cleared for corn, soybeans, sugarcane. It's also cleared for cattle. Brazil is one of the leading exporters, if not the leading exporter of beef in the world. A lot of land, a lot of jungle. The easy way is to clear the land, oftentimes illegally, and let the cows loose. Jaguars prey on cows. You can't think of an easier prey item for one of these big cats. And they get shot, and the habitat is shrinking. So, what are the answers? Quite frankly, I don't know. But it's complicated. Conservation is complicated. Jaguars once ranged from Arizona, Texas, and even Louisiana, all the way to Argentina. And now their territory is rapidly decreasing and highly fragmented. And we have to maintain wildlife corridors where these animals can travel and keep the gene pool healthy and diverse. It's complicated. Let me wrap up here. If you want to follow me on social media about my crazy adventures, my photography, my school presentations, or books, you're more than welcome. I am ready now for questions. I'll be happy to answer as many questions as possible. Bryce, feel free to jump in
Love it.
and take over if you want. I'll be happy to see the questions. I guess they show up in the chat.
Yep. They'll be down in the chat. So thank you for that, Michael. And yeah, those are some really incredible shots that you've got there. And being able to kind of see the things that you've seen and have the experiences that you've had. You mentioned that experience with the Jaguars being one that was probably you were the most intimidated. But beyond that, what have been some of your most either memorable or impactful experiences with wildlife, either in the water, out of the water? One of the things that have really stuck out to you over the course of your career.
There's I've been doing it so much, Bryce. I have 3,700 hours underwater, and it kind of just turns into a big snowball. But probably my favorite encounters are here in Florida, where I live. I think it's so important to fall in love where we live all over again and see things with a fresh set of eyes. Florida is always surprising me with new material, new things to photograph. I would also say that I'm very attached to Brazil. The photographic opportunities are great. The jaguar is by far the most impressive animal I've seen. Just really cool stuff.
All right. Wonderful. So the chat is certainly starting to make some movement. So we have a couple of questions kind of coming in. So Carrie wanted to know during that first photo that you had with the hammerhead, it had a small animal that was attached to it. What was that? Was that one of the small remora fish, or like what
You're
are
you're ab-
some of the
you're absolutely
small
you're absolutely right. That was probably a remora. Think of the remora as the laziest fish in the ocean. The top of the head of the remora
just
looks like the
it
bottom of
sticks
a
to it?
sneaker, and they hang on and they get free food and transportation.
Yeah. Yeah, just the laziest riders in the ecosystem.
Absolutely right.
Yeah. So what was the catalyst that really got you into photography? You mentioned that it was a passion for you, but what was it that really kind of sparked your interest initially?
It's funny how life works. I started diving in 92, and in 93, I was in a dive vacation, my first in Honduras, in an island called Roatan. And a very trivial decision at the time would change my life. I was asked if I wanted to rent an underwater camera for the day.
Mhm.
And I did. And little did I know the impact it would have in my life. It changed my life entirely. And I became obsessed with photography. There's no history of photography in my family. This is a hobby that just turned into a passion. And the photography led to a lot of magazine work, and then it led to books, and now I have 9 books, and I have a wonderful career getting invited to speak at all over the country, and I absolutely love it.
Wonderful. So let's talk about the children's books a little bit. You mentioned this a couple of times, and we addressed it a little bit at the beginning of the travels that you do and the presentations that you do for children's books. So how did you get into writing children's books? Why was this something that you decided that you wanted to pursue, and what has it meant to you professionally and personally?
All right, thanks. I started writing magazine articles, and at the time I thought, why am I writing for somebody else when I can write my own books? And I created my own company, Batfish Books, back in 1998. And I knew how much I liked nature books, and we were just talking about this before the presentation. And I thought, wouldn't it be cool to have a children's book? And then one book, I got it in something like 100 Barnes and Nobles, and then through Barnes and Noble, I started doing school presentations. And then the light bulb went off. I said, I really don't need Barnes and Noble. And then I hired an extremely competent manager from Barnes and Noble to help me develop my business, and the rest is history. It just took off.
All right, wonderful. So Dana asks, do you think individual animals have quote personalities? You mentioned Jenny, the tiger shark that's relatively local to your area. I think
Right.
that as you find animals in certain areas that are more familiar to people and those that are studying them, you kind of get a certain sense of their tendencies. But from your experience, have you been around animals that have maybe more docile personalities or more aggressive personalities, and what's that experience like?
Absolutely. They're all different, like you and I. Some are grumpy, some want to play. There's kind of a movement now in the shark diving world that I really don't agree with. And a lot of people are now saying that sharks are friendly, and they're not friendly. It's a big predator, it's an opportunist. The guy in the photo that I showed you with the shark, with the photo with the big mouth, that shark seriously injured that man a few years later after that photo, ripped his hand off, and it had to be reattached. And so it's a serious, serious animal. Um, all animals deserve respect.
Mhm.
Um, I was almost seriously injured by a sea turtle. I was bitten in the leg out of nowhere, and you would never think that a turtle is dangerous. But when there's a 300, 400 pound turtle trying to bite you, it's scary. So long story short, respect is the magic word. You have to be careful. You
Yeah,
can't
never would have thought that a turtle would be the one that would be the one that's coming after you. I'm sure you've probably had other experiences, but that one stands out for a reason.
absolutely, yeah. Alligators also. And
Mhm.
here in Florida, you should learn your lesson sooner than later, because also incredibly unpredictable and dangerous.
Yeah, absolutely. I think kind of a side question from this, thinking about, you know, people in society and the way that people, live in cities and they have kind of this dissociation and this disconnection from nature. You talked about Jenny, injuring a photographer who was on a dive, and the experiences that you heard from the locals with the jaguars. What, if any recommendations might you have for people in learning more about nature and being connected with it, and maybe some experiences that they should have to maybe pull them out of the concrete cities and seeing what nature is really like?
You're absolutely right, Bryce. I say this in my presentations all over the country, how important it is for kids to get out there and connect with nature and leave the computer and the telephone inside the house. And that's super important. I think a lot of kids don't have that anymore. A quick story. I was in Fairbanks, Alaska, presenting, and you can't think of a better place than Fairbanks, Alaska for nature. And these kids had no clue what lived around them, the opportunities to see cool animals. I also see that here in Florida. I think anywhere in Florida, you're never more than 80 miles away from the ocean. And I have
Mhm.
met children, unfortunately, disadvantaged kids that have never been to the beach or to the ocean. And the second part of your question is do what I do. Always hire somebody, an expert, a real expert who has local knowledge, who will take you to the cool places safely without putting yourself in risk. And I always do that. I always do that. And I think that's important.
Yeah, absolutely. So Don wants to know, so a little bit more about your Lehigh history. So what did you study at Lehigh, and how did your experiences at Lehigh help kind of to shape your career?
All right, my undergraduate degree was in international relations. I had a minor in French and one class short of a minor in writing, and I always had the writing bug. Then I went to work in New York in consulting. I got my MBA here in Florida through the University of Miami. And I always had the photography bug. And so, parallel to a corporate career, I was doing the photography. But one thing that I always did with the photography is I always treated it as a business and not as a hobby.
Mhm.
And I think people um, should be more professional and be more businesslike because it's work. It's fun work, but it's work. Especially these presentations, books. It's a product that I have to insure, distribute, sell, market. It's a business. It's just a fun topic.
Absolutely. So this one I'm going to kind of combine in kind of a two-part question. So you mentioned a little bit about your students and their experience with the environment, and you touched a little bit on your presentation today about the environmental issues, the climate change, habitat loss. And then from your experiences being in the water, what do have you seen anything, directly from your experiences, or, due to, environmental issues, pollution, global warming, over the course of your career, like, have you noticed significant changes in the environments that you photographed?
Absolutely, Bryce. Let's say you come down for Memorial Weekend to Florida, or
I'd love
anybody
to.
watching this
I'd love
presentation.
to.
Yeah, and it looks great, and it is great. But I've been here since '91, and I have all this time in the water, and I have seen a steady decline in water quality.
Hmm.
It's undeniable, and it doesn't get the attention it deserves because most people are not in that water like I am.
Mhm.
So, what here, our local beach, you used to always have crystal clear water, just like the Bahamas.
Mhm.
The days that we have that crystal clear water now, you can probably count in two hands.
Mhm.
And that's because of pollution, construction, coastal development. Florida is a basket case of many things. And what is so surprising is the resilience of nature.
Mhm.
It hangs on, it adapts, but I think it can only take so much. And I
Mhm.
think I would say that here, from what I have seen, water quality is the biggest issue. Climate change, here, the changes are extremely subtle, but in the Florida Keys, you've had water temperatures that have been crazy, crazy hot, and the coral cannot bounce back. You know, they
Hmm.
can only it can only take so much. So it's complicated. It's easy to throw in the towel and give up, but you have to be optimistic. There's no other choice. You know, you can't give up. That's how I look at it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's ongoing work. You know, we're in the environment every day, and we have the capability of making changes or making impacts to it, and it's ultimately down to choices whether or not we want to make the right choice for the environment or make the right choice for profits or whatever else the motive might be. So,
Yeah, there's a
um,
lot of different um,
competing factors,
angles and
competing
interests.
interests.
Yeah, and it's complicated, but it's not all doom and gloom. You know, some things are looking great, some are not so great. Let me give you a quick example. In the early 1980s, Florida, the entire state of Florida, only had a few hundred green sea turtle nests.
Hmm.
For argument's sake, let's just say 500. Okay. Today, we get more than 60,000 green sea turtle nests in the state
Wow.
of Florida. Crazy. Why? And local and federal protection, minimal intrusive rules that safeguard the turtles, and also so important to point out, during the last 50 years, the population of people in Florida has exploded.
Hmm.
There's an often quoted statistic that 1,000 people move here every single day. It may be slowing down a bit, but during that time, it got super crowded, and yet the sea turtle population exploded. And it's an example how by making small sacrifices, we can make the place attractive to both wildlife and to people. So there are a lot of good stories. Another one that I can think of is the shark population. Sharks have been decimated worldwide by the shark fin trade, and Florida is extremely sharky. Before, you had to spend $10,000 to go see a tiger shark in the Bahamas. You can go here pretty much almost any day and see at least four, or a hammerhead, or a whale shark. And so it's not all doom and gloom. And unfortunately, sometimes the bad news overwhelms the little bright spots in the environment.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a mixed bag, like with many things. You know, there's areas
Mhm.
of progress and areas of regress, but you know, I think
Mhm.
that there's always ways to improve and minimize those negative impacts.
Absolutely.
Um, we got some more questions here. We've got about
Right.
10 minutes left, guys. So if we aren't able to get to all your questions, I apologize, but definitely feel free to reach out to me or reach out to Michael, and we can further these conversations. Talking a little bit more about the night diving, I can imagine that there's probably some additional complexities to navigating those charters. Especially as you mentioned, 14 miles is an outrageous, distance that you can get carried off. So, is there, you mentioned the marker buoy and the light. How often do you have to surface? Do you guys use dive lines that are attached to kind of a main focal point, or like kind of what are the more logistical complexities that go into a dive like that?
Well, great question, Bryce. The lights themselves, they're attached to a 60-foot rope
Hmm.
that looks like a Christmas tree underwater. There's no better way to describe it.
Hmm.
And uh, the boat, the divers, and the lights all drift together.
Hmm.
And almost everybody on the boat is an experienced diver, and everybody has a compass. Usually, 90% of the time, that current is going northbound. So if you get separated, all you got to do is navigate to the north, and eventually, keyword eventually, you are going to catch up to those lights. And I can tell you from personal experience, there is no better feeling in the world to see that glow at night underwater when you've been separated. And other techniques to get back to where you should be, like you mentioned, include surfacing, uh, displaying a red light, and that's a signal for the boat to come and pick you up.
Mhm.
And if there's still time in the dive, they'll drop you back into the area near the lights. But the safety is so important. And what makes it so frustrating is sometimes you find something really, really cool and you're just getting separated and pulled apart by the current, and you have to forget what you were photographing so you can catch up and stay near those lights where you should be.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, I'm trying to just kind of sourcing through the rest of the questions. Kevin wants to know, can you expand a little bit more on the problems with the increase of the impacts of the ecosystem around the jaguars? There was another question earlier about beef exports to the United States from Brazil, and obviously, like as humanity you know intercedes and impacts the environment of natural animals and natural species, there's going to ultimately be areas of conflict. But has there been any and this goes back to those conflicts of interest that we were talking about earlier, but like regulations within the Brazilian government about protected areas or expanding the language around regions that can be maybe not considered for deforestation or for agricultural purposes. Like, can you go a little bit more into your experience around kind of that aspect of the work that you've done?
Yeah, absolutely. First off, Brazil is such a huge country.
Mhm.
My experience with the jaguars in the Pantanal, which is a swamp, is not the Amazon. That's a whole
Mhm.
different biome. Okay. So I know that in the Pantanal where the jaguars are, they have done something smart. They have monetized these cats.
Mhm.
You have people coming from all over the world to see a jaguar. I'm not going to say it's guaranteed because it's not a zoo, but you have a pretty good chance to see a jaguar in this swamp in Brazil called the Pantanal. And through the monetization and the money, and these trips are not cheap, locals now have an incentive to protect the habitat and the cats. And it's, in my opinion, from what I have been informed, is everybody wants to jump into the bandwagon.
Mhm.
And but there's always, obviously, you're going to have your bad apples that want to clear the land, or there's some horrific stories of agricultural interests using super toxic. I think one guy, don't quote me on this, may have even used Agent Orange or something like this to clear the land. And and also, which I'm very pleased to see, is there's kind of like a conservation movement in Brazil that's slowly growing and giving voice to the wildlife and to the habitat. There's still a lot to be done, but there's signs of life there, which are really important. And unfortunately, nowadays, if you don't put a dollar value to anything, people are not going to want to protect it. And yeah, it's going to cost you a few bucks to go see a jaguar, but there's a very good chance that that animal is not going to get shot, that it's not going to end up in a zoo, and it's going to stay there generating dollars to tour companies, hotels, restaurants, airlines, the whole chain.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm trying to think of like what I would pay to go see a jaguar in real life in the wild. Like, what does a trip like that cost for somebody traveling down there in dollars?
I would say just the boat part,
Hmm.
just the boat part, you're probably in the neighborhood of $500 to $600 a day.
Okay. And that's a boat charter, like to go through the swamp to try and find where they're at.
Exactly. And you saw the rivers in the photos. One thing I forgot to mention is the main jaguar tourism takes place late August, September, and October, which is
Hmm.
super hot, super dry. All the animals go to the water to drink and cool
Hmm.
off and hunt. And the jungle is so thick, you're not going to see anything walking through the vegetation. So you stay on the boats, and these are motor boats, and now they have an awning so you don't cook under that hot tropical sun. They have drinks. It's a very first class operation, and you go there and look, and people have their camera gear, and sometimes you're going to have what people call a Jaguar jam. On one cat, you may have 30 boats
Mhm.
and everybody's there and they want to see the Jaguar. And the purists may say, oh, this is not for me. This is crazy. But the way that I like to think of it is, you know what, this is really good. The more people, the better, because they're all paying and people will want to protect that golden goose. Follow me?
Yeah, absolutely. All
So
right, so
that's important.
we're getting down to our last couple of minutes. So I have one more question from the chat that I want to address, and I have two closing questions for you if we
Okay.
have time for them. So, so Mike wants to know. So I also share a connection to nature. Can you give us a few basic tips around photography of simple subjects that you could do with a cell phone? So what are some basic, things that somebody could take away today if they wanted to go start taking some pictures of birds in their backyard or squirrels playing with their dogs? What are some recommendations that you would do for some basic photography?
I get this question all the time, Bryce. People get so hung up on equipment. They
Mhm.
think that you need a $20,000 camera. You don't. All you need really is this thing here,
Yeah, the
you know?
quality of cell phone cameras is really, really good if people aren't familiar
Yeah,
with them.
it's incredible. Obviously, it has some limitations. But I tell everybody just to go out there and take photos.
Mhm.
And anybody can press the button. The hard part is taking a compelling image with a message, with a story. And I'm trying to crack that nut. Even today, after 33 years, people ask me, hey, Michael, what's your favorite photo? And my reply is, I haven't taken it yet,
Mhm.
and
Love that.
you just have to go out there and take photos. And you never know when the stars are going to align and you're going to have a wonderful opportunity in front of you.
Yeah, and that actually leads really nicely into my next question, which do you have a white whale? Is there a specific species or a behavior that you've been trying to capture, or is there a particular shot that you've been wanting to get that you haven't been able to?
Oh man, there's so many. Sticking to the Blackwater story, there are deep sea anglerfish, the
Mhm.
stuff that you see like on Discovery with the
Yeah,
little
they got the thing
lure. It's
hanging off the
called an
top of their
esca.
head. Yeah.
And the male is parasitic. He fuses his body to the female. It's just really bizarre stuff. I would love to see that. And once in a blue moon, somebody will see one of these deep sea anglers. Um, but there's so much, and I think going to Mars and to the moon is amazing. Yet we have still so much here to explore.
Mhm.
I hope we're not just giving up on the planet because there's a lot of really interesting things to see. The
Yeah.
cool thing about these Blackwater dives is you can see something alive that no one has seen yet, and that's
Mhm.
pretty compelling.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So, kind of for my closing question, as we kind of wrap things up for the day. So I wanted to ask you. So, when somebody closes one of your books, or walks away from today's presentation or a lecture that you've done for a school, what is the one thing that you hope stays planted in their minds? About our relationship with nature, our relationships with the ocean. Like, what would be your kind of one takeaway that you would hope that an audience member would pull from this?
That I have planted a seed of interest in protection of the environment, and also make that person pursue their dreams like I have.
Mhm.
And I have a cool story to wrap up. Back in 2003, I went to a very nice Catholic school close by in West Palm called the King's Academy. It's just one of many schools. And a few years back, I was in a sea turtle hospital here doing a book signing, and a girl in her 20s came up to me and she goes, "You look familiar." And I'm like, "I do. From where?" She goes, "Did you present at the King's Academy?" I said, "I did a long time ago." She goes, "I remember your presentation and I remember your book, Fishy Friends, the first one." And I'm like, "Oh, cool." And I said, "So what are you doing here at the Loggerhead Marine Life Center?" She said, "I'm studying marine biology in college." And I thought that was pretty cool. And I'll never take credit for her deciding to study marine biology, but I would like to think that my presentation 20 some years ago kind of sparked her interest in this
Mhm.
topic. So that's my goal.
Right. Wonderful. Well, Michael, you've done some really amazing photography just from that small snippet that you've shown us today, and the really great work that you're doing. Talking about conservation, talking about wildlife to elementary school kids and middle school kids and so on. And I just want to say thank you. It's as somebody who growing up had a really big interest in the oceans and in nature. Seeing that there's people like you that are still continuing to inspire others to do so is really really compelling work to be done. So thank you for that.
Thanks so much
Um,
for having me. It was wonderful.
yeah, absolutely. So for our audience, that wraps our presentation for today. So thank you so much for joining us on this presentation, and we look forward to seeing you guys in the next one. So have a great day.
Take care, guys. Thank you.